I've titled it, in case you're interested, wondering, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ooh.
Boom, boom, boom. Well, Guardians of the Galaxy is, if you didn't know, a very popular movie franchise now. It's in part 2 of its run in theaters everywhere and maybe near you. Did you know that true believers and Sabbath keepers are supposed to be guardians of the galaxy? We're supposed to be watchmen on the wall. Ezekiel 3:17. If you have your Bibles or your Bible apps, if you want to go there. No matter, I'll read it out to you anyway. Ezekiel 3:17. God's word says, Son of man, I have made you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth and give them warning from me. Son of man, I have made you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth and give them warning from me. See, in the good old days of the castles and the good old days of Yeshua's time of walking the earth, they always had these surrounding walls built around the compound, around the city, around the castles, and they had watchtowers at each corner, 4 watchtowers essentially. And from atop those towers, the vantage point there, men could monitor their animals, they could be on the lookout for thieves coming after their harvest, and guard against the enemy coming to conquer their land. And to do that, they were taught to sound a warning if they saw any danger or trouble coming and advancing. And then everybody knew that they'd have to shut the gates of the town and prepare for battle. And not only did those watchmen do that, but when they stood up on their towers, on their posts, they also began to discern and identify certain patterns and lifestyles of the people that were developing. So not only were they taught to warn of danger coming, they were also taught to instruct. Now El Elyon, the mighty one, God of Israel, called certain men to warn the citizens of Israel of their sins, to call them to repent, or there would be consequences. Now these men, prophets, would deliver the message, instruct the people, and that was it. Their job was done. Pretty heavy responsibility, though, then and now. Noah was a watchman. He was a guardian, but very few listened. Lot was a watchman, but few listened. And now we see the end is near. Uh-oh. I feel a little Frank Sinatra coming up. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled each and every highway, but much more than this, we need to do it Yeshua's way. Because the end is near, folks. It really is. And God is selecting certain people because they need to be performing these same watchman or guardian tasks. Because those selected few can see clearly the storm clouds, the dark clouds gathering on the world's horizon. And we're supposed to be shouting from the rooftops. And as watchmen, there are going to be days where we're going to feel completely alone, like there's nobody else in our camp. And that's really truly one of the reasons why the sons of God are becoming weary. The spiritual weapons sent to attack wear us down. And yet Jesus tells us, hey, you're going to be persecuted. When you pick up your cross and come after me, count on persecution. And when we are, he says, just ask. I'll provide the strength to be able to get you through this. Now we are called to be those guardians, those watchmen. And we do have specific and defined job duties. We need to speak up. We need to point out the wrongs, the lies of those who have pretty much seduced the world to where it is today. And where it is today essentially is on the brink of global collapse and disaster. Never has it been so evident. Since Donald Trump took over office of the President of the United States and began his assault against the elite member families of the banking cartel that rules the world, there has been unprecedented panic and hysteria among those people whose wickedness is being exposed. They don't like, as Gerald just mentioned, you shine some light on the darkness, and the darkness do not like it one little bit. And the extent to which these evil people are attacking, have been, and continue to attack Mr. Trump really should, if any of us have eyes to see and ears to hear, be a clear barometer as to the gravity of the depravity of these people. However, no one will notice that if you're watching and reading the mainstream media reports. Because mainstream media is essentially in the back pocket of the propaganda arm of America, which is the intelligence community. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, they're the ones who tell major news networks and papers what to say, what to write, what to do. And they lie continually. In 1981, that's 6 years ago, 1981, the former FBI director named William Casey said, quote, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the public believes is a lie." And we're there. This is exactly where we are. Let that sink in. We'll know. This is the former FBI director of 1981 saying, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the public believes is false, a lie." Donald Trump has been shedding light on the darkness that is the swamp in Washington, D.C., and the pushback by those who prefer to not see the light has been enormous. George Orwell, author of 1984, said, "Those who control the past control the future." Well, what is in front of us right now is a future of unimaginable consequences. Unimaginable because the world has been deceived. They've been conditioned to believe and accept this huge lie that has been just dumped on us from our birth. And the mainstream narrative of governments and media and Hollywood and music, entertainment, celebrities, plus your sports heroes, is totally controlled by big money. That means the Luciferians that control the world provide them their big money to say and do what they say and do. The syndicate called the Illuminati. Now, Yeshua said the whole world lies in the evil one. He didn't say a portion of the world, some of it. He said the whole world, meaning the world and all of its systems, are controlled by Satan and his followers. And here's the thing, at the most crucial time in the history of this planet, as we know it, never has there been such a lack of interest or a lack of concern shown by professing Christians. The last 8 to 10 years, whether it's been the slaughter of unborn babies through abortions or selling off of baby body parts for flavoring of their cannibalistic sacrificial sacrifices, to now Hollywood openly mocking Yeshua and the Father with their movies and clearly hailing Satan as their God. What we have around us, everywhere, are portals, gateways to hell, opening. And the mind of man can just not conceive it at all. In the physical, it's challenging for people to believe because they've been conditioned by the propaganda machine of the world. Example, the Clintons, Bill and Hillary, have had all sorts of nefarious dealings with the Russians in the past to sell them, for one thing, uranium, and obtained millions of dollars that went directly to the Clinton Foundation. And nothing was ever mentioned about this. Nothing was ever mentioned about this in mainstream media. However, Mr. Trump becomes president, and all of a sudden he's accused of doing everything with the Russians, especially collusion to have won the presidential election. Now recently, those accusations, if you didn't follow it or didn't hear, were proven to be absolutely false. They were proven to be fake news through fired FBI Director James Comey's testimony, his sworn testimony, and I'll deal with that a little bit more straight ahead. But also, the fact that that demoness, Hillary, if you didn't know who I was referring to, that demoness who ran against Trump for US president, she's been saying, well, he should be impeached. Wow. You know, and that's another clear indication of how the deep state, the shadow government, the Illuminati-placed people within Washington running the show are just totally misdirecting and distracting the public from the complete evil that this woman has been perpetrating for years. To this day, at this point in time, right now, 93% of everybody still in positions of power within the US government, within the US military, the judicial, the financial sectors are Obama appointees. Still, 93% of them. Let that ruminate for a while and marinate in you. Mr. Trump is playing against a stacked deck every day he goes to work. He's surrounded by traitors, and he needs to clean house, starting with the White House. Donald Trump needs continuing prayers of protection and for God's will to be done in his life. The flushing out of this deep state of the political scene in the US continues, and he and his administration are targeting the rhinos. Acronym RINO stands for Republicans in name only. And they are not going quietly. They are kicking and screaming and publicly attacking and threatening Trump. And again, to paraphrase Yeshua, everything that's been hidden is being revealed. Light is being shone in the darkness, and the darkness ain't liking it one bit. We are at a time of this age where everything is in play. Everything. And true believers are supposed to be up in the watchtower. We're supposed to be the guardians, alerting God's people that danger is on our faces. Prepare for battle. We are the guardians of this earth. The central thread that binds all these members of the deep state together is their child sex trafficking network. That network of pedophilia, or Pizzagate, as it was termed by the mainstream media, that debauchery. That is the hub that supersedes all their other wickedness, gun running, drug trafficking, and light has been shone on that darkness. That's why the deep state is fighting back as viciously as they have been against President Trump, doing anything to undermine and destroy his credibility. After the WikiLeaks emails scandal broke, linking Hillary Clinton to child sex trafficking, she said to some of her cohorts that if the truth ever gets out about this whole child sex trafficking network, this is her speaking, she said, we're all going to hang from the lampposts in the city square.
Her own words.
Her own words. Now there's physical evil and then there's supernatural evil. The supernatural evil used to kind of hang back, just lurk in the shadows in the world of the occult and all the secret ceremonies of the secret societies. However, now it's more and more out in the open. It's all in play. And the blood of the innocent is crying out. Like Seth Rich. Are you familiar with Seth Rich's story? Who Seth Rich is? I'll tell you. Seth Rich was a former DNC, that's Democratic National Committee, data analyst. Seth Rich was shot and killed almost a year ago now, last July, on a Washington street. Tap, tap in the back. Official statement to this day concerning his case, quote, police have found little information to explain his death. A year later, Seth Rich was 27. He worked for the DNC on voting issues. He also leaked John Podesta's emails to Hillary Clinton surrounding Pizzagate to WikiLeaks. And he was murdered less than a month after those emails were leaked, when he passed them on to the whistleblowing group WikiLeaks. Officially, his case remains a mystery, and the Democrats and the deep state keep deflecting all inquiries about the ongoing investigation. Mainstream media's latest spin is that a random serial murderer, is responsible for Seth Rich's death.
It's true.
Might be. Somehow I don't think so.
No, her.
Well, some of the people that work for her, certainly. Yeah, people are also raising questions about the death of a man named Sean Lucas that occurred last August, just a month after Seth Rich's murder. Sean Lucas served the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, with a lawsuit alleging fraud in the presidential race. So he has to go. Seth Rich's murder is just that. It's a cover-up. Because if there was nothing to it, and if this was just a random case of a man being in the wrong place at the wrong time, would there be such an ongoing panic among the Democrats and the deep state to make the situation just simply go away? Nah, I don't think so. This is absolutely another prosecutable crime involving the Democrats. And federal law enforcement officials have had their hands tied because of the appointees of the Obama nation. Have you heard the name Saul Alinsky before? Anybody familiar with that man's name? Saul Alinsky? Yeah, he was an American community organizer and writer. He's generally considered to be the founder of modern community organizing. He wrote a book in 1961 titled Rules for Radicals. His organizing skills were focused on improving the living conditions of poor communities across America in the 1950s. And then those ideas were adapted in the 60s by some U.S. college students and other young counterculture era organizers who used them as part of their strategies for organizing on campus and beyond. American democracy was altered by Alinsky's ideas. He's very close, they say, to being an organizational genius. Well, you know who two of his main proteges are?
Obama.
Yeah, and Hillary. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton followed his teachings to the letter, as well as all other socio-communist, Islam, fascist takeover kings and queens that are behind the scenes. Saul Alinsky's plan, at its core, was for these types of people to just simply intimidate and overwhelm. Now, I am not the biggest Donald Trump fan, gotta tell you. To me, he's improved, as I've seen him over time, but to me, he still is just this fast-talking cowboy, arrogant, prideful, and those are some of his good points. But he's just a celebrity billionaire used to getting his way. Like I say, he's beginning to get a little bit more humble. I guess he's keep bumping up against all these people against him, so he's learning the hard way. But you know what? I've also heard him and seen him do. He is talking about stopping the persecution of Christians. He's talking about honoring God. He's not out in public praising and worshiping some foreign false gods like his predecessor did, like Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is. I'm even less a fan of the lies and the injustice being carried out against Mr. Trump. Plain and simple, Seth Rich was murdered. And he's not the only one. As Mr. Trump continues to drain the swamp of Washington politics, we pray that he revisits Andrew Breitbart's murder investigation. Breitbart was this conservative icon, if you didn't know. He had a website, still running, Breitbart News it's called. He ruffled a lot of feathers of many of the high-level ranking elite members, especially over the last couple of years through his blogs and that independent internet news site, which drew millions of visits monthly. And in fact, it made him quite a noteworthy person with a fair amount of clout. And yet when he died, not one mention in mainstream media about how and what happened. Instead, they gave a lot of time and space and headlines to all these right-wing conspiracy theories. And there's been others that have been killed off too. Investigative journalist Michael Hastings, Tom Clancy. Anybody familiar with Tom Clancy, the author? He's written many, Tom Clancy. He's written all sorts of bestsellers. A number of them have been made into full-length movies. The Hunt for Red October was his. Sum of All Fears, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger. He was the author of all of them. 100 million copies of his books are in print. At the time of his death, Tom was working on a novel that was said to be very Manchurian Candidate-ish, but it was filled with fact. It exposed the Saudi Muslim plant in the White House and the direct funding of Arab money that went into getting him into the White House. Birth certificate, you want the real one? Tom Clancy has it. Had it. Past tense, he's no longer with us. He said the Obama administration was made up of Marxist Muslims who all took their orders from senior advisor to the president, Iranian-born Valerie Jarrett. Now, it's well known to intelligence communities, intelligence agencies around the world. We're talking KGB, Mossad of Israel, MI6. It's well known among that intelligence community that Obama was a foreign plant who was placed on the path to the presidency by ultra-rich Saudi nationals. Tom Clancy was killed because he was getting ever so close to divulging that secret that they didn't want the world to know. He was murdered by people within the Obama administration's federal government. The author was just too good at predicting events. He'd become a threat to the nation, to their nation, the Obama nation. Tom Clancy predicted everything from 9/11 to Bin Laden's raid with razor-like accuracy, so they had to silence him. They shut him up for good. America has become a blood-soaked nation that's been subjected to continual mind control, continual leftist propaganda, to continual sexualization of children, to continual perversion of the children. It's a sick and twisted world. It really is. And it's becoming more and more mainstream because Father in Heaven has called up some certain people that he is employing to start stripping away the veneers of the world, but especially to America. And essentially he's telling the USA as another veneer is stripped away. You think you're so self-righteous? This is what you're really like. In our opinion, we believe God has employed President Donald Trump as a kind of prosecuting attorney to bring light to the wickedness of the world. They hated Yeshua without a cause, except that he was doing essentially the same thing. He was shedding light on the darkness of the world, exposing sins, especially of the ruling class, the upper echelon. Now, I'm not saying Trump is Jesus. However, have you noticed that whenever the president takes a biblical approach to just about anything and a stand against wrong and evil, all the fangs of hell start gnashing away at their teeth at him? And Donald Trump faces all sorts of opposition and persecution. Donna Waslowski, high-level State Department person, came within a whisker, a heartbeat, an eyelash of losing her job recently. And you know what her crime was? She had a framed photo of Donald Trump on her desk after the inauguration, after he was already officially named president and in the job and sitting in the White House. That was her crime. While her co-workers still had framed photos of Obama on their desk, nothing was said. That was okay, apparently. This is the mindset that Mr. Trump faces and has to deal with every day. The president of the Philippines, Duterte, recently said that the reason he turned to Russia as a business partner is not because he doesn't like Trump. He said it's because he cannot even trust America because the president is so undermined at every opportunity. There's a Cold War brewing because of what Mr. Trump is continuing to reveal. There are now international consequences because of the collusion and the corruption that's been going on for years, especially the previous 8 years before Mr. Trump took office at the White House. Take the EU, the European Union. What a joke. Wow. Angela Merkel of Germany said just recently, every woman in Germany, her words, every woman in Germany better get used to following Islamic law, Sharia law. Wow. This is the leader of Germany. Imagine what any woman in Germany that has ever had any kind of dealings with sexual abuse, rape, has got to be thinking, hearing their country leader tell them this. Or for that matter in Sweden and Norway. And as those countries continue to undergo more brutality and more bloodshed and more violence against their women, the women, whether it's Angela Merkel or the British Prime Minister Theresa May, they seem to be absolutely neutering their country's defenses. After that recent London Bridge attack that just happened, in the last 2-3 weeks, the British Defence Minister came out and said that Britain, would have trouble fielding 6,500 men to fight in the event they need to do battle. And then there's NATO, with all their saber rattling, saying, well, things better be done our way or else. Really? Wow. So we have Britain on one hand saying that they might have trouble getting 6,500 fighting men up in case it's needed. But we have the nuclear weapons, we can just press the big button. And then there's someone in the Russian parliament responding to that, oh yeah, you go ahead, you try that. You'll be gone in 30 minutes from face of universe. Or less time actually. And you know what, the really scary thing about that is this is not rhetoric. This is them meaning what they're saying. I mean, how can anybody in their right mind actually want World War III? But that's what, especially during the previous 8 years of Obama's fraudulent administration, was threatened. And these corrupt, egotistical liars had access to the nuclear launch codes to play a great big game of chicken. Who cares about the people? They're just collateral damage, If they die, oh well, too bad. We've got our utopia that's been planned for us for hundreds and hundreds of years by our masters, so we're good.
Master Satan.
These threat boys and girls are the same ones in charge of Pedogate, or MSM Mainstream Media's description of it as they called it Pizzagate, which is just code language, a slop talk for their child preference. That is at the core of the deep state. Baal worship. Plain and simple, front and center. It's Baal worship through child sex trafficking, that whole network, which involves the biggest movers and shakers in politics, in Hollywood, in music, in sports, in the military, in religion. They've got its web everywhere. And now, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is sanctioning a sexual revolution that is going to culminate in the legislation and wholehearted support of transgenderism, but also will support the legalization of pedophilia. Can you believe that? And as the deep state is further implicated and exposed for this role that they have in Pedogate, Pizzagate,
What's pedophilia?
you can expect all sorts of counterattacks like this. The UN celebrated this decision that I just told you about as, quote, a great step forward for human rights in the United States. The most heinous organization in North America is a group called NAMBLA. That's another acronym, NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Association.
Love
They're-
Association. Love Association.
Love Association, yes. Their slogan, sex before 8, or it's too late. Children are about to become part of a world that they are not equipped to live in. And before you think that this can't ever happen, George Soros is one of the major contributors of money and funding of NAMBLA. Yes, that George Soros, Mr. Globalist himself. And if that's not concerning enough, realize that Kevin Jennings, an Obama Department of Education official and a close friend of Hillary, also is involved with the group NAMBLA as well. Have you heard of the name Chris Cornell before? Anybody know who Chris Cornell was, I guess is accurate now. He was the lead singer of a grunge rock band called Soundgarden. He died a few weeks ago. Medical examiner to this day still has no official cause of death. The family says his death was sudden and unexpected. Chris Cornell was set to blow the whistle on the pedophilia child sex trafficking network involving the music industry. Can you connect the dots? World leaders are sitting under the Arch of Baal. The Arch of Baal is a stargate. Baal worship always demanded, still does demand one thing: the death of innocent children. Slaughtered, burned in the arms of Moloch, bled out, throat slit. And we are witnessing this abject paganism, hedonism, and cannibalism around us globally, especially in the United States. When I was putting together this message, and even delivering it now, it's a struggle to find the proper words to explain the pure evil wickedness that people need to know exists. And we're called to be watchmen, guardians of our place in this galaxy, to share this kind of message. The launch point for all other evil wickedness of the deep state, the common thread that exposes everything, is this: the child sex trafficking. It's a crimson thread of blood of the innocents. And yet what we are seeing is a complete numbness and dumbness, a total denial of what exists and continues to happen today. And then you have the sweet by and by crowd who are just saying, oh, everything's going to be okay because Jesus is coming back. He'll save us. And what they don't realize is that, and don't understand and grasp, is that there is a very large, very hostile group preparing to war against them. Here's what I mean by saying that. Under the former abominable one, who occupied the slaughterhouse for the previous 8 years before Mr. Trump, radical Muslims were placed in authority positions in intelligence centers, in the military, in government-run programs. And guess what? Christians all over the world have been dying. Well, look who had access to files on everybody. Obama's appointees in all the fusion centers. Their outward story was, well, we just want people in place here to make sure and check that the president is not being spied on. Baloney. It's about everybody being under surveillance, total control by very evil and nefarious people. That's why Edward Snowden and Julian Assange came forward as they did. They spoke up and out against what they knew was just wrong and illegal. We, all of us, we people, not just here in this room, but people on the earth, we're in this huge wildlife sanctuary. It's like a game preserve, and we're being hunted. I think Edward Snowden deserves the Nobel Peace Prize because he displayed courage and bravery against all odds. He risked his career, he risked his life to be a guardian, to be a watchman, to tell everybody literally how hopelessly ensnared and enslaved they are. And by not recognizing how deeply ensnared and violated you all are, you have no privacy. I have no privacy. Nothing that belongs to you in the way of your identity. Because everything you think, everything you say, everything you do, everything you think to say and do, everything you've done, everything you've heard or watched has been put into algorithms. All of us are part of this mind-controlled big, massive conditioned computer program, the Matrix. All of us have been mind controlled and conditioned from birth. And only Yeshua's truth can unhook us from that deception. Don't buy the lie. Edward Snowden, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks were called of God. Whether they were believers or not is irrelevant, because God sets up people over kingdoms. That's why Donald Trump is president of the United States. God called him to do what he has been and is going to continue to do, to shed light on the darkness, the evil of the Illuminati-run deep state. Because if God's people turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to him tapping them on the shoulder, well, he will choose anybody he wants to. It's not the first time he would have done that. He's done it before. And it was Snowden and Assange who exposed the deep state. It was them, being guardians of the galaxy, watchmen on the wall, that exposed all the underhanded, deceptive, secretive, corrupt dealings. 300,000 WikiLeaks emails involving John Podesta, Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin, and Hillary Clinton. And who knows how many more are still going to be uncovered. And they were all violations of national security protocol. And what did Hillary do when they presented her with it? Well, you can't play dumb when you're the Secretary of State. And how about the Clinton Foundation? Why isn't it being investigated, or ever was? Because the deep state is doing their misdirection again. They're continuing to do everything in power to control the narrative. Mr. Trump really needs to take that back, because if he doesn't, it's kind of like inviting the Trojan horse with all the bad people inside of it within your walls and then just letting them have at you. Because they're out to kill him. These people want to kill the president because he's been called to expose them, to be a guardian, to be a watchman. And for those that are close to him who are traitors, we need to keep praying that God's hand of justice prevail to expose them through whatever means are available. If it takes an angel, so be it. Or if it takes evidence that is beyond being able to contest, God will see to that. Like he did just recently through a fired former FBI Director James Comey's testimony just a couple of weeks ago. It was a huge victory for President Trump, although you wouldn't know it if you watched or listened to mainstream media. Because, in essence, the big thing that came out of all of this was Comey testified to Congress. He admitted to telling President-elect Donald Trump, and then after he became president, Donald Trump, 3 times, he was never under investigation by the FBI. Comey told the President-elect on January 6th, then again after he had inaugurated and become president on January 27th, and still again on February 15th, that the FBI was not investigating him. Now, even more important than that, in his testimony, James Comey admitted he told congressional leadership, that's both Democrat and Republican leaders in the Congress, the exact same thing. He told them that Mr. Trump was never under investigation. He was never being investigated. And he told them all. The source from which I got this information listed all the Congress people's names, but I just picked on some of the highlighted ones, maybe some of the more recognizable ones. James Comey said he informed Paul Ryan, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, Devin Nunes, Adam Schiff, Richard Burr, Dianne Feinstein, and Mark Warner. He personally told Republican and Democrat leadership and both the Senate and House Intelligence Committees that President Trump was never under investigation. Well, think about that for just a second. That means that all these professional politicians knew the media claims of President Trump being under investigation that you saw always on TV or in the newspapers were false. Lies. Fake news. Which also means all of their key aides, the staffers who assist each of these politicians that I named, and all of them that were in Congress, and sit in on all their intelligence briefings. They also knew that President Trump was never under investigation, and that whole network extends downstream to thousands of people on Capitol Hill and everyone surrounding the White House and everybody in key legislative contact. They all knew President Trump was never under investigation. That reality and acceptance also extends those concentric circles to those media voices and sources who were previously highlighted by WikiLeaks for close personal contact with each of the campaign teams and political constructs of those professional politicians. The entire deep state, the shadow government, knew President Trump was never under investigation. And how many interviews did Pelosi, Schumer, Ryan, McConnell, Schiff, and Warner give where they just simply allowed the media's "well, Trump is under investigation" narrative to remain unchallenged? Why would Republicans, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, Richard Burr, and to a lesser extent Devin Nunes, never directly challenge the media narrative in their interviews? I'll tell you why. They're traitors, plain and simple. Think about the scope of this all. Do you still cling to this invisible thread that the uniparty doesn't exist? There aren't Republicans, there aren't Democrats, there's one party, the uniparty, and it's totally controlled and told what to say and do by the deep state, the shadow government. And if you still don't believe that they don't exist and it's just a conspiracy theory, well, I don't know what to tell you. Think about this. Mr. Trump puts on a bulletproof vest before he goes to work every day, and he does it for the people who elected him. However, since God called him to do his job, God is literally going to expose the enemy in his camp, because the American public is being sold a false bill of goods. They have been programmed to look at this situation as well, how much the president is doing wrong instead of how much the deep state is trying to take over. The average person in John Q. Public doesn't see it that way, and that's because Saul Alinsky's teachings are being followed to the letter. Intimidate, overwhelm. It's an attack upon America's civil liberties, and very soon it's going to be an attack, outright attack, on Americans' lives. The deep state, or the shadow government, would prefer to stay in the shadows. They would really prefer to be concealed, rule secretly, like they've been doing forever, seemingly. However, when people like Donald Trump and Edward Snowden and Julian Assange and Andrew Breitbart, Michael Hastings, Tom Clancy, Chris Cornell, and others continue to shed light upon the darkness and be watchmen up on the wall and guardians, the deep state, the shadow government, is going to have to come out of the darkness to take over, because that's what they're planning on doing. I personally believe their big next move is coming soon, and it's going to be for them to install a dictatorship off a false flag event. An event like a shooting a week and a half ago of a Republican congressman on a baseball field. If you didn't hear about this, the shooter's name, James Hodgkinson, is dead. Republican Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a congressional staffer, a lobbyist, and a U.S. Capitol policeman were all wounded in this incident. And had not the Republicans, Scalise's Capitol Police security detail been around at the time, there would have been a massacre, an outright massacre of Republican congressmen. Well, what kind of country has America become when there is a planned assassination of dozens of congressmen right on the streets of Washington by a man doing a very good imitation of an MK Ultra product? And to pour a little bit more gasoline on the fire, the main victim, this representative, a Republican representative from Louisiana, Scalise, was sponsoring legislation related to child sex trafficking. So he had to go. Hodgkinson, the shooter, the Manchurian candidate shooter, had a list of congressmen to kill. Yet, here's an interesting thing. He could not recognize any one of them on the list. He had no idea who the men were. He didn't know what they looked like. Had no idea. Now, if I was ever on a reign of terror, I would certainly know who I was supposed to hit, wipe out. I would certainly know that. And additionally, isn't it interesting that Hodgkinson just happened to be staying in the YMCA adjacent to the baseball field where the attack took place, and the congressmen who were all at the baseball practice corresponded, oddly enough, to the list of congressmen he intended to murder. Well, how many coincidences do we need before we really start to see the light? Also, I saw a news report immediately following that shooting that stated that the shooter was shot but expected to survive. He didn't. Neither did Seth Rich survive, despite not having life-threatening injuries. The best example of that pattern that I can remember is Lee Harvey Oswald. Why do all the perpetrators seem to always be done away with? They die. I'll tell you, it's because dead men tell no tales of the false flag events. America has become a banana republic. Who would ever have thought that the deep state would target sitting congressmen on the streets of America? Of course, there are those that will believe that old traditional, he's just a lone wingnut assassin theory. That goes all the way back to Oswald. That's just a very thinly veiled false flag attempt that demonstrates how far the deep state is willing to go to cover up their crimes and achieve their goals. And they have their payrolled front people, entertainment celebrities, and sports heroes out there waving the banner for them, for more of this stupidity to happen. Like when this shooting occurred, you know, the political left celebrities that were out there talking, they made it seem to say, well, we never meant this to happen. I mean, we're just clowning around here. We're having fun. We're just like children in the sandbox. Right. Kathy Griffin holding the decapitated head of Donald Trump. Not really, yeah, just, yes. But that's exactly what it's just a joke. I'm not, it's just a joke, laugh it up. Yeah, well, what it is proof that she's overly fluoridated is what it is. Snoop Dogg releases a music video in which he shoots a toy gun at a clown dressed as Donald Trump. Well, that's just satire, it's not serious. Then the prestigious Public Theater in New York City stages Shakespeare's Julius Caesar with a Caesar who looks just like Trump, who is assassinated. Artistic commentary, yes. Comedian Sarah Silverman tweets, "Wake up and join the resistance, and once the military is with us, fascists get overthrown. Mad King Trump and his handlers go bye-bye." More satire. Vogue. Familiar with Vogue, the magazine? The women's fashion magazine? Supposedly a fashion magazine, but in an article just this past week by the contributing editor, it urged women frustrated by the current Trump administration to awaken your inner witch and feminist powers. Vogue quotes the author of a recently published book, Witch, Unleashed, Untamed, Unapologetic. They say, for so long, witch, has been a term that's been used to demonize, stigmatize, and repress women. But right now, the world is being reclaimed. There's a growing worldwide anti-Trump movement that encourages people to cast binding spells on him, invoking the assistance of demons of infernal realms and other spirits. This is what he faces every day on his job. And these people who are doing this, the celebrities and others, but predominantly the celebrities, they are the people that they're screaming out for social justice, equality for all, free everything for everybody, utopia or something. These are the people who think of themselves as rebels, while they really are working for elite globalism and its agenda of planetary government and planetary corporate control. These celebrities, if you haven't figured it out for yourself, are clueless. Chaos and destruction are phases in the openly planned globalist takeover. But understanding that is far too complex for their simple minds. Following a sequence of thought from A to B to C is virtually impossible for them. They think they're overthrowing the power. All they're doing is adding to that power, and demonstrations like these are leading to civil war in America, the us against them mentality. That will spark a false flag event, which will then allow the deep state the open door to take over and establish a dictatorship and install complete totalitarian rule in a police state and martial law. And that's when the real stuff is going to hit the fan. One of the biggest things the American public still doesn't grasp, doesn't understand, is that they have an enemy within their borders right now. It's an army that's been brought in because of open borders. And remember how much flack Mr. Trump received when he said, we're going to close the borders and we're going to stop the immigrants from coming in? Well, that's why they got flack, or he got flack, because the deep state's plan was for them to just kind of sift across the borders and look what's been happening. Well, actually, on that issue of open borders and unlimited immigration, the people who are doing and calling for the allowing of these immigrants to come in are like a million miles from realizing the true globalist intent. In 1969, 4 years before co-founding the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller and launching an eventual capture of the White House with their created president, Jimmy Carter, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote, quote, "The nation state as a fundamental unit of man's organized life has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concepts of the nation state." The question was, how could nation states be eradicated? And one of those answers is open borders, unlimited immigration, change the face of the nations, wipe out all local traditions, radically alter demographics, make separate nations an extinct concept. Of course, they needed a cover story. It was and is humanitarian share and care. We must let everybody in and embrace them. Just love them. And another aspect of the cover story is create wars to displace populations who then would flee to the West. Have you noticed a lot of those immigrants that have been fleeing to the West and crossing the borders aren't elderly, aren't young children? They're fighting age, young and healthy men with an appetite for destruction, more chaos in the works. That's the whole operative right there. But the chance of celebrities catching on to this and speaking out against it in this era of political correctness is absolutely zero. Remember not that long ago, well, we talked about it here in the sanctuary. Remember Gerald doing maybe not necessarily a teaching, but we were just talking about newsworthy events. At the time when Obama was still in the White House and running the government, he went about and his administration was buying up all the ammunition from dealers so that the public that was licensed to carry couldn't buy bullets. Well, where did all that ammo go? To warehouses where it has been stored up until the exact proper time that that ammo is going to be given to the immigrants that are going to be making up the army of the deep state. And the reason that's going to happen is because there's 250,000, 250,000 American fighting men and women deployed on assignment outside the country, and they can't leave their mission and return. How convenient, huh? The presence of Donald Trump in the White House just provides the ideal opportunity for these unconscious globalist foot soldiers to ramp up violence, to blame it all on Mr. Trump and bring about a major course correction back to a globalism much more severe than anything Trump would support, back to a globalism with a vengeance. And they'll call it humane, calling it love, calling it caring, calling it freedom, calling it equality. The current idiot's delight system of education makes it so easy for the young to just avoid thinking conceptually, outside the box. They're just programmed as well. We've talked about that many times here. So they just receive what the institution of education tells them to do, what to say, and then they figure, well, we'll just go out and we'll wave the correct banner, we'll throw a brick through a store window, set a car on fire, and demand social justice, because that's what we're supposed to do. And then pause for a moment and admire the work of a 66-year-old socialist who tried to wipe out congressmen on a baseball field, as if that was a contribution toward the making of a better world. Just throw your mind in the garbage can. No need to use it. Revolution is in the land of the US, and it's because Obama fanned the flames of racism, was pro-Islam, is a Muslim. He's a Saudi Muslim plant appointed by Muslims to keep, he appointed rather, Muslims to key positions of authority. People need to understand that liberals only speak pacifism. Behind them is just a line of destruction, like Seth Rich, and Sean Lucas, and Andrew Breitbart, and Michael Hastings, and Tom Clancy, and Chris Cornell, or anybody else who gets too close to the truth. Remember, if they kill one of their own, they're not going to stop there, because they serve the father of all lies, and Satan's only mission is to steal, kill, and destroy. And that is why the deep state is willing to commit planetary suicide. The Democrats are a party of blood. Not excusing the Republicans either, because it's all one party, essentially. They're both, and have been and continue to feast on the once great foundation of the United States of America. They sold the residents out, and now they're selling themselves out. They will do anything to stay in power, and they will just keep on fiddling while America burns and riots. And this isn't doom porn either, you know. It's just setting the stage for the ultimate coming battle. Remember just a few weeks ago, Gerald was sharing how he's been having all sorts of requests for dream interpretations of all these horrific and awful nightmares and visions that not just one or two people, he said, were questioning him about. There were like hundreds of similar dreams. God is speaking to many people. He's telling us all to prepare. Prophecy continues to unfold right before our very eyes daily. And we need Yeshua now more than ever before. We need to press closer to him than ever before and pray one for another, for true believers, globally, for the city of Jerusalem. That when it comes time to flee, it's not going to be in winter or any Sabbath day, and that Yeshua will take us to a place of safety. That's preparedness. That's having a battle plan. And we are way beyond the point of no return. And don't listen to the scoffers and the naysayers along the way. You know, the ones who tell you, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. You know, you're brainwashed. And there'll be plenty of them who say those things. We're supposed to just keep doing God's will and plan for our lives. Noah was mocked constantly, ridiculed daily. Hey, what are you building there? What, an ark? Why? Rain? What's rain? It was water from the sky. What are you drinking, old man? But he just kept on building and kept on preaching, being a watchman, being a guardian of the earth's people, kept doing what Father in heaven told him to keep doing. Few listened to Noah. And boy, did they pay the ultimate price. Are you listening? Are we listening? North Korea is one step away from launching a nuclear missile that could hit the United States, according to the military experts and the logistics people who know all of these things. Meanwhile, a cyber attack or an EMP attack that brings down the power grid is not just speculation. Bible prophecy indicates this summer ahead could be a summer of rage. And if economic calamity strikes in the next 6 months or so, the world will be plunged into financial chaos. We are now at a time of history when extraordinary events are becoming the norm, will be the norm. And the crises are just not financial, they're moral, they're ethical, they're political. And in the final stages of an era, in the final stages of an age, all values disappear. And that's when the ugliest side of mankind appears. Pastor Hugh shared this scripture last week, and it's so valid. 2 Timothy 3 verse 2. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Whatever crisis may await us, it's a wise thing to remember Matthew 5 and verse 5. Blessed are the meek, the teachable, for they shall inherit the earth. So do we have hearts open and receptive to qualify as teachable? Father in heaven is testing us again. Because when Jesus cried, "It is finished," our Yeshua meant it. His part of the covenant is done with us. Now, we're the watchmen on the wall. We're the guardians of the galaxy that need to be sounding the alarm. Like we said earlier, Son of Man, I have made you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth, and give them warning from me. And we just did. So thank you.